Hey, peace and blessings to you. My name is Jerry B. I am the entree musician, and so are you. And I'm going to say it right at the beginning. We are going to meet the ultimate entree musicians today. Now, interestingly enough, I have interviewed these brothers in the past. It was like 100 years ago. But they have continued to set the pattern of what it means to be entrepreneurial and keep their love of the music going. This is none other than George and Geoff Hazelrigg, better known in some circles as the Hazelrigg Brothers, and in others, Hazelrigg Industries. So we're going to talk about all of that today. George and Geoff, man, what's happening?
Hey, Jerry. It's great to be with you, Jerry, as always.
I wish this time we had a fork in our hand like the last time that we met. You know, we were breaking bread together.
Yeah.
But it's so cool to get in touch with you guys again. I tried to look through my archives. I think it was 2018, 2019, the very first time that we connected. And the shutdown hadn't happened. And you guys had I won't say just begun Hazelrigg Industries, but you were really starting to get things on point with Sweetwater and whatnot. And it was just an ideal time. You only had one album at that point, Songs We Like, but so much has happened. And I figured it would be great to have a conversation to see all of the ground that you've covered since our last conversation, which has been quite a bit.
It's a lot of ground. It's a long drive from here to Indiana and a convenient breakfast stop in Youngstown. So yes, a lot of ground has been covered. A lot of air has been covered as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do me this favor, if you don't mind, for those who are watching. I know who you both are, but would you introduce yourselves? Who's Geoff? Who George? Who's Geoff? You know, so that the audience would know who you are.
So I'm Geoff. I play bass and do a whole lot of other things.
You're also the boss of the whole situation, right?
I'm not the boss of anything.
That's not how I know it. But if you're Geoff, that means your brother must be George, and George.
By process, yes.
Exactly. Yes. And you play amazing piano. You guys are excellent composers. The Hazelrigg Brothers music is everything that your website says it is, and it's everything that everyone that I know who know of you say it is completely engaging. But let's talk about the Songs We Like album before we go into what happened with Synchronicity. First of all, you've come together with John O'Reilly Jr. That album is several years old, but it continues to speak to us today. When you collected those songs, were you trying to create the timeless album and project that has become?
I think that one of our driving traits in everything we do is that we have nothing to do with fads. We just don't have anything to do with fads. I mean, you know, everything we do is based on really old stuff. Everything I own is old, like really old. We just don't follow trends at all. And you know, this does a couple things. First of all, it means that we're not trendy, which means that a lot of the time we aren't popular because we're not following current trends. The flip side of that is we're not subject to, you know, things like the downturn of the Bee Gees when, you know, they started burning, you know, disco records. We don't, you know what I mean? Like that we're not at risk of that happening. And so our recordings and our, you know, Songs We Like was a culmination of years and years and years of development and both in music, aesthetics, how we played, our approach, and in our engineering. And songs we like happened finally after years of trying to get it to happen, because we finally 5 days earlier came up with an engineering solution to capture the trio that we were okay with. We still use that today. That was 7 years ago. I mean, actually, when we cut it, it was really 8 years ago, and we haven't changed our microphone scheme since then. Actually, we've changed very little about that whole process since then. And it works, and it's not subject to trend, and it doesn't sound like other people's piano trio records, from either from a musical approach or from an engineering approach. And it didn't sound like anybody's stuff 8 years ago. And it probably won't sound like anybody's stuff 8 years from now, unless people actually start to listen to us, which,
I understand it. And my whole thing was, is that the reason? I mean, that was intentional when you put these songs together, because by far they are great covers of songs that not only you guys like, but everybody likes it. But you came in like Luther Vandross and said, I'm going to reinterpret what the original composers meant, and you really took ownership of the song and made them your own.
We finally got Songs We Like recorded because 5 days before we started the sessions, Geoff and I finally figured out a recording solution, an approach that actually worked, that captured the trio in a way that we were okay with. And we just didn't have that before, because we would perform in the room and people would say, wow, that's amazing. And then we would listen to the recordings back and it just wasn't translating. And so we spent years trial and erroring everything we could to try to get this stuff to translate. And it was literally days before we started the recording sessions for that record that we got something that worked, and it's what we use today. And it's, other than very slight tweaks.
Yeah, that's exactly.
And really nothing in the microphone part of it.
Right.
We've upgraded our audio system a little bit from Tascam DSD machines up to Pyramix. So that runs twice the DSD resolution. And I talk about this stuff and everybody's like, what is he talking about? Right.
Well, that's what makes you guys unique, because, what I hear and what I'm trying to decipher as I'm listening to specifically this CD, Songs We Like, is your intentional approach at how you're going to perform this music, because you make it yours. You take this Luther Vandross approach of reinterpreting Jimi Hendrix and the Police and Men at Work. And for me, that's profound. But then you take just as much care is in the how it's captured. So yeah, we're going to take this intentional approach on saying, okay, we're not trendy. This is purely a Hazelrigg Brothers production or interpretation of this song that everybody digs, but then also to make sure that to the nth degree, every note, every nuance is captured. And I guess that's the tightrope you walk between the musicianship and the Hazelrigg industry guy.
It's actually why we're here. I mean, it actually is why we're here. We've just never been happy with the way things sound. A lot of people get into, the recording process because they really love it. They really like, hey, I recorded this. It sounds great. It makes you feel good. This is good. I love mixing this stuff because I think something. Yeah, isn't that great?
Right.
That is not our world. Our world is what are we going? This is awful. Like, how are we going to fix this?
Everything's a fight. It's just a fight from the first note to the last. From hitting record to listening back to the master.
I was listening a few years ago to a really interesting interview with Pat Metheny on NPR.
Mm.
And I forget who was giving the interview, but he was talking about how, it used to be that he would go into a record project, and by the end of the, when the master comes back, he would have felt like he had fulfilled 5 to 7% of his vision of what it should sound like. And the interviewer asked him, well, what is it now? And he says, well, now it's like 25 to 30% of it. And that's pretty good. And that is pretty good. And I think those numbers are probably the same for us. We're probably 25 to 30% of the way there. I mean, it's hard to define what that other 75, 70% is.
Yeah.
It's probably holograms. It's probably you actually entering into the listening rooms of your audience, just being transported to play right in front of them. That may be the key.
Funny enough, that's easier to do with less technology. All you have to do is come see us playing concerts.
That's true. That's true. Now, all right, let's just go there. I mean, you opened the door for that. So, Hazelrigg Brothers concert, there is as much technical acumen as there is in your recording. Is that right?
Oh, it's that's much worse.
Mm.
Is
that your own opinion because of your, attention to detail, or what?
Troll.
I mean, okay, yes. Is it our opinion? Yes. Is it the reality of the state of the industry? I mean, I'm willing to debate this with anybody, but I say yes, it is. So you probably know that I toured with Slim Man out of Baltimore for years, and Geoff and I produced a bunch of records for him, and I toured with him for a long time. It was a great band. It was a very pared down band, and in the sort of smooth jazz industry side of things, it was extraordinarily pared down. It was only 4 of us, and Kevin Levi was on saxophone, and he's of course just genius. And Slim played bass, and Johnny Cole was playing drums, and it was just a minimalistic approach to playing that kind of contemporary stuff. And there was one tour that was especially exhausting. It was just terrible routing. We were driving 600-800 miles a day, to get from one concert to the next. And we had so many problems with the live sound that we started to dictate, what the sound engineer was allowed to do. And it came down to maybe 4 channels. 4, like, you can hang one microphone on the drum kit. Well, I want to do, nope, this is what it is, and we noticed that the more power we took away from whomever it was running sound, the better night that we had. Because I'll tell you what, a bad sound engineer will ruin your night, and there's nothing you can do about it. Nothing.
Absolutely.
I'll say this. I'll preface this as being my opinion, although I doubt anybody who really understands this is going to argue with me. Live sound nowadays is atrocious. I think it's why the live music scene has suffered a lot, because the gear that is built to support live sound has gotten cheaper and cheaper with more features and more digital processing. And the engineers have less and less training musically. And I don't know. I mean, in the last few years, I've gone to see legacy groups from, you know, full bands down to single singer-songwriters with a guitar in venues from 200 cap to Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
And the common thread is like, wow, somebody needs to do something about this. This is really, really, really bad. And, you know, it's bringing people, you know, through 2-3 generations of expectations of, you know, why isn't this an enjoyable experience? And I read all these articles now about, oh, this tour was canceled and that tour was canceled and these ticket prices are, you know, this, that, or the other thing. Well, nobody wants to pay $500 to go see something that doesn't sound good. Who wants to do that? Stay at home and watch it on your flat screen.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I
you
really
know?
do. And the reason I was laughing, and I wasn't laughing to be cynical, but I just, within the last 72 hours, went to a concert of a Grammy Award winning artist. And so, you know, I don't know the sound people there. I know that they have all the technology. I know that the one dude was walking around with his iPad during during the, you know, show, but he's missing cues. Like, where was the saxophone player? Why wasn't his mic turned up? You know, why is there distortion in the kick drum? There should never be distortion in the kick drum, and you're a jazz band. I mean, you know, if you're rock, maybe perhaps. But you know, I mean, and it's just like you have all of the technology, but none of the. I guess training would be a good word, but I'm looking for something more organic, like it's in you to know that that's not right.
Acumen, talent. I don't instinct.
Yeah.
Ability to tell yourself the truth.
Yeah.
Hey, bro, this doesn't sound good.
That's
what are you going to do? You know, fix it. Is it too loud? First of all, turn the subs down.
Right.
You know, so, okay, well, this brings us back to, you know, our methodology for recording.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, okay, I'll start here. There are a lot of really good piano players in the world. There are some really technically phenomenal piano players in the world. I am not one of them.
I would beg to differ, but we're just going to
well, I mean, I grew up playing harpsichord. And actually somebody just gave me a substantial instrument that I've been redoing, and I've been getting back into playing more. And so that brings me back to where I was when I was 7, 8 years old or whatever, 10. And it's like, okay, all right, that's where my playing comes from. That's always been a problem for me to jump to playing piano, because there's technical differences in approach and stuff. It's also probably why I don't sound like other pianists, because my technique is still, you know, at my age, despite the fact that I've revamped it a half dozen times, still not what you would find in a typical Juilliard student.
Well, enough of the self-deprivation there. I think that you are fantastic, but I know you're getting to a point. But I just needed to rebuff
I'm sorry, I had to go all the way around the barn to get there.
I see that. Geoff, why didn't you stop him? But anyway, I mean, you're closer to him.
That's because he knows that we'll never get there if he stops you. Right. So the point is, something that we've discovered as a trio, and I've discovered as a player, is there's much more power in being a player when what you're trying to do is convey an emotion or a musical idea. To be able to hit a note so softly or chord so softly that you can just hear the fibers on the end of the piano hammers just brushing the strings. I mean, there's a note on that Men at Work. No, it's not on the Men at Work tune. It's on the on Zeppelin's song on 10 Years Gone on Songs We Like. That the hammer doesn't actually hit the string. It actually gets so close that a couple fibers of the end of the hammer just brushed it, and the note comes out just sort of subliminally. I mean, you almost can't even hear it, and that's what we had to capture in the recording process, is to be able to get those types of details. And when we do an arrangement, sometimes if, you know, the original recording goes into this big section where they're really rocking out or whatever, we actually step back and play, you know, much softer or much more carefully. There's so much more power in restraint in a lot of music. And so the fact that I don't have the facility to keep up with, you know, I don't know, probably most of the kids that come out of jazz school at this point, that's okay. Because that's not what we're going for.
I can dig it. So with respect to synchronicity, because, you know, you guys were not allowed to talk about that when, you know, in our first interview. It was still secretive, and I think you still had to get a lot of clearance happening. But now that that's behind you, first of all, it's a masterful interpretation as well. Synchronicity from the Police was one of my favorite albums. I think I was like, I don't know, in my 19 or 20, I think, when that came out, and I was just like really blown away, not only musically but lyrically. And you guys found a way to interpret the lyrics through your instruments that were just like, tell me about the approach through the process. If you don't mind, I'm curious to know about the licensing, the permission, as well as the approach on how we address the recording, if you wouldn't mind.
The licensing is the easy part. You know, that's like, what's it, Harry Fox agency, or, you know, you go on. That's actually not a big deal. It does cost a lot of money.
Oh yeah, Sting's made a lot more money off this record than we did.
But it's not a big deal. The record itself took us, I mean, in a way, it's not quite done yet, because we don't have the vinyl sitting in our hands, which is imminent.
Oh, yeah. It's a phone call I got to make this
But
morning.
I mean, what's it, 2024? We, you know, from the initial thought of this whole project, I mean, we've got a dozen years into it.
Right.
Yeah, we actually started. Well, it's more than that.
Yeah,
We started playing with some of that repertoire 25 years ago.
Right.
And then there was the arrangement of Miss Grodenko was a huge process of
I think that was the last one we recorded for the record, right?
Was it?
I don't know. I always say this, but maybe not.
It was the most difficult by a long shot.
Yeah.
And we had revamped that arrangement
Every which way.
weekly. Yeah, for years we did, just to try to get it.
And in fact, I think we revamped it the day that we got the final thing that you hear on the record.
Right.
I mean, we make, you know, minute changes every step, every time.
A lot of it was trying to be able to play it too. And I know I don't know if it comes off looking like a difficult thing to play, or it doesn't, or I don't know. But for me at least, it was an extraordinarily difficult thing technically to play. It's not just that it's a lot of notes. It's that they all have to be phrased a very certain way, or the whole thing falls apart. And I think that the day we got the tape that's on the record was the day that it actually happened. And you know, I think that we can do it now live, and it works.
But that's because we know what it sounds like.
Yeah, that's right. So we have a reference recording live at this point. But yeah, a lot of that record was that way. I mean, it was a lot of trial and error. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, the thing about the original record is, you know, it's three guys, and they are definitely making a lot of noise for three people. I mean, the Police in general, I mean, they covered an awful lot of ground, three musicians. But they also had the benefit of instrumentation, you know. I mean, there were synthesizers parts, and Andy Summers had a guitar synthesizer and all these effects pedals that did a lot of this stuff, and there's a saxophone solo on one of them. And you know, they could layer different guitar parts, and even Stuart Copeland was layering drum parts and you know, percussion parts. And we can't do that. So it all had to happen with us three in real time, and it pushed us to sort of the edge of the envelope of what we could do with the instruments. And there are a lot of places on the record we had to have this disclaimer, right? Like, this was actually cut with three of us in a room. There's no magic. Nobody's wearing headphones. It's just three people in a room with three instruments that are all acoustic. Nothing's plugged in. And we're playing this stuff because it sounds a lot of the time that we're each playing two instruments at the same time, or two different parts. So Geoff will pluck a note, or pluck a melody, or pluck a bass note and bow something at the same time, or you know, do a lot of double stop stuff where he's hitting bass notes and playing a melody at the same time. I've got stuff where, you know, where I'm muting a part with my left hand and playing, you know, part of it with half of my right hand, and the melody part with the other half of my right hand, and that sounds like two instruments. And then John's got, you know, a variety of sticks. I mean, there was one, she was walking in my footsteps, where he's got these sticks that have little egg shaker maraca things on the end, covered in this felt. So when he hits the drum, you hear the drum sound like it's been hit with a mallet, and you hear this shaker part. I mean, it's crazy stuff. There's one point where, I think it's Synchronicity 1, where it's this one breakdown section that lasts 4 bars or whatever, and he goes to playing the rhythm with his hands on his knees, and that's what you're hearing. And so, arrangement-wise, there's just so much stuff going on, and it just kind of made me laugh. There were a couple reviews on the record where we were accused of playing it really safe. Well, you know, it's stuck too close to the arrangements of the record, and they're not really stretching out or whatever it is. It's like, dude, you have no idea what's going on here. This is really complicated. And the fact that, you know, we could actually get the melodies to sing the way that, you know, Sting sings on the record, in a way, or at least convey those ideas. And of course, it's not just any singer too. I mean, it's this thing we're talking about, and he's got a very charismatic way of getting these lines to translate, which is why he's Sting. One of the reasons.
Which is why I said, you know, with the lyrics and just the depth of the lyrics, it's amazing that, you know, you're able to, with your instruments, reinterpret the emotion that he brings about, because these are not just pop lyrics. I mean, he's really saying something with depth, and I think that you captured it. And I also think that is a place, you mentioned John O'Reilly Jr., your drummer, to kind of park on him being such an intricate part of Hazelrigg Brothers sound, because I think you guys have found the perfect mate in this guy. And we've talked about it at the Cracker Barrel. You know, Geoff, you've never retained his autograph for me to bring it back so that I can have it safe. But he is one of my favorite drummers. Can we document how he came to joining the band? Because we didn't talk about that in our first interview.
Yeah, I guess we met him or bumped or seen him locally. There, you know, Doylestown had a jam session that was really kind of hip, you know, 10, 15 years ago. and we would go to it and hang out and meet a lot of people. And he showed up on one of these jam sessions, and I don't know, somehow we met him, but briefly. And I should maybe preface this by saying that at that time, 10, 15 years ago, we would just sort of cycle through drummers. Like, they would maybe last a year with us before they'd walk out on a gig or yell at us and leave, or something like that.
Let me ask though. You guys are probably the equivalent of Donald Fagen and Walter Becker, though. I mean,
that's an accusation.
I just wanted to put that out there. That might be an issue, but continue, please.
Anyway, so we were playing this place not far from here once a month, and they would like schedule us every month. And I was finally like, look, just let us do, whatever it was, the first Friday of the month. You don't have to schedule us. We don't have to email you. There's just expect that we're going to be there the first Friday of every month. And, it was a few days before the first one of these that we were finally like, it was like our regular thing. And then our drummer walked out of rehearsal on us, What was the quote? Why you guys always try to make things better? That's what it was.
Why do you guys always have to make things better?
There should be a quote on your website. You should have that,
Man, there's so many quotes we've gotten through the years. It's someone, anyway.
Well, interpret that as you will. I mean,
yeah. Although I will say one of my favorite quotes was, I just came to pick up the pizza. I didn't expect to have a spiritual experience from coming to see us.
That was at
the
same place. Yeah, it was.
But anyhow, so two or 3 days before this gig happened, this guy walks out, and we sit there for an hour, and we're going through every drummer we can think of in this area. Like, we've got calls, we've got calls into guys that we said we've never called. We can't work with that guy. What are we going to do? But John actually came back, and it was like Friday night. He was like, I've got this other gig, but, if just pay me the same that I would make on this other gig. So we're like, no problem. So
it was more than that. We said, we'll pay you everything we make on the gig if you learn this entire repertoire in the next 3 days.
Wow.
He did.
Wow.
Yeah. And having one rehearsal, it was the best gig that we had with the trio ever. Yeah.
Wow.
Ever. And that was, it's not like we weren't playing with, we played with some serious players. We did a record with Chester Thompson some years ago. We've been on a couple records with Dennis Chambers. We were on the scene in DC and Baltimore for all those years. I don't know what's in the water there that grows drummers, but man, like a lot of the greatest ones who've ever lived come out of there. And so, I guess we have expectations, but
of course.
Another thing about, to go back to like, hey, there's more power in just controlling something and trying to connect on a lower dynamic level. They're not teaching drummers this in school. Like, these kids are idolizing these players that can play, all this stuff and fast and loud and all this. And it's like, that's not, you want to drive everybody out of the venue, do that. That's not the point of being a good drummer. A good drummer can just forget it. I didn't want to even play that note, or just be able to tap something very lightly and controlled and have that create a composite with the other instruments. Man, that's much harder to do. That's much harder to do. And in fact, a couple of weeks ago, some interview with Dennis from the 90s popped up in my my Facebook news feed or whatever, and he talks about that. He's like, yeah, I'm Dennis Chambers, and people expect me to be able to do this, that, and the other thing. And when I go do clinics, that's what I do. But when I'm playing with Steely Dan, that's not what I do, because that's not the job.
Exactly.
So John O'Reilly understands this stuff on an absolute masterful level.
Yeah.
And he knows not to hit that note. We don't need that note. And he knows, okay, this is going to happen. And this is what happens when that chord out of the piano meets that note in the bass. And this is how he can back that up to create a splash of color that embellishes those things. And, getting back to Pat Metheny for a second. When I was 17, I went and saw Pat Metheny Group, and what was that album with Phase Dance? Travels. Yeah. That was the most phenomenal thing I'd ever seen. And the thing that I came out with from that show was that I could not tell the difference between the drums and the bass and the guitars and these things that whatever that was that Lyle Mays was playing. And, you couldn't hear the difference between any of these things. They made these composite sounds, the way that the finest orchestra, led by the greatest conductor, playing the greatest repertoire can do, it's just another level. And that's what's missing in the education of young drummers, and has been for a couple decades now.
So why do you think that is? I just want to go there. I mean, I'm a big believer in feel. I'm a big believer in the inside out. But so why do you think that is, that drummers are not being taught the nuance of approaching a song?
It's the hard work, and it's not fun. And it doesn't say, "Hey, look at me." And you're not.
So do the professors bypass that? I mean, are they not?
How controversial am I allowed to be? I mean, a lot of these professors are teaching in college because they can't do that stuff. A lot of people teach because they can't. He's got this look on my face like I'm getting myself. No.
Take the shovel, man. Take the shovel.
Yeah, all right. And this is what's happening. No, it's Woody Allen. It's those who can't teach. Those who can't teach physical education. I mean, and look.
So we're going to talk about the obesity of gym teachers now. Is that
okay? Now you're helping me dig this hole.
I'm just saying.
No, look, and nowadays there's a lot of really capable jazz musicians that are especially that are working in universities, because the jazz scene has become so unprofitable that that's how they pay their mortgage. I get it. This is how we pay our mortgage.
Yeah.
So it's not like that there's not great teachers in schools. There are a lot of really top guys who are teaching in schools, no doubt. But I think that the prevailing culture in a lot of these schools is to appeal to more base desires of these kids and to try to appeal to whatever it is that their dreams are, however unrealistic they might be, not because they're not going to make it or not talented, but because I don't think they understand what the business really is, and that if they're going to make it, they're going to have to change a lot of these perceptions of what these things really are.
I agree with you. I agree. I mean, I come from a spiritual dynamic, and having grown up as quote unquote a church drummer, as they say, and there are pros and cons to that as well.
Mhm.
But from the church at least that I grew up in playing drums, it was the message was king. The choir is not the king. The artist is not king. The song. So the song will tell you what it needs, and that's how you have to approach it. And if you
Absolutely.
don't, then
Yeah.
your
Then,
chops don't matter.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's about serving it, right? You have to serve the music. You have to serve the purpose of the music.
And there are certain
Otherwise,
songs you can say with a kick drum and nothing else. If that's just the drive, then you play that kick drum with all your heart. Keep your
yeah.
hands off the snare and the hi hat. They don't need to say anything here. You know what I mean?
One of my favorite jazz trio recordings of all time, and it's not just mine; it's a lot of people's. Is that Ahmad Jamal?
Yeah.
What's the track?
Here in my head.
Yeah, and it's what, 8 minutes long. Ahmad Jamal barely plays a solo. He's going section to section to section. That whether he came up with these things ahead of time or not doesn't matter, because they're so strong compositionally. That's the end result. The bass player is playing two notes, and the drummer is playing a simple kick drum pattern and a closed hi hat for 10 minutes. 8 minutes. He's going on. What's the song called? Named after this plant.
What's the album?
Pointiana.
Which album is it?
Pointiana.
It's not a plant. It's not a plant at all.
Pointiana.
That's all right.
But I mean, what's the project? What's the name of the album? Then that'll.
Gosh, I don't
That
know.
it's on. I can't remember.
All right, let me ask you this question. What's your, this is off the beaten path, but since we're
Yeah.
here, what is your favorite Ahmad Jamal project? What's the name of it? I have mine.
I have no idea. I never got into listening to records that way. I had
Oh man.
a few records that I had because, I spent $2 on them at the Princeton Record Exchange instead of actually having lunch that day.
Sure.
And because we didn't have stuff. I didn't have any money. We didn't have records. And there was you couldn't just pull open your iPhone and pull something up on
No.
YouTube. If you didn't have it, you didn't have it. The most impressive, one of the most impressive things I've ever seen, and I can't even find it anymore, was a drummer that we'd done some work with in Baltimore, George Gray, had been playing for Ahmad Jamal. And they did this project, and I think it was done by a French film maker, and it was a string orchestra, not very large group, but maybe a dozen string players. You remember? And it was George Gray, and I can't remember who the bass player was.
Yeah, I don't remember who's on
And it was shot in black and white, and it was shot in this very stylistic way where you see like sudden eye movements and stuff that were kind of manipulated in a very cool way. And wow, that was really mind-blowing. And I don't know where it came out or when it came out, and the only reason that we saw it is because George Gray showed it to us.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, here's something I recommend. Rossiter Road is the project from Ahmad Jamal. Rossiter Road. Just tuck that away, and when you guys are in your shop and you're working and you put that on, 8 of the greatest songs that I've heard from Ahmad. And I love Ahmad. I love his approach, but something happened on that album. Tell me what you think after you hear it, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see trios taking that approach now. Where where it's more of a chamber group, you know what I mean? Where the, you know, the product is greater than the sum of its parts, you know?
True.
And look, I mean, for any jazz players coming out of school now who are, you know, saying whatever, what the hell does he know? He can barely play or whatever. And he doesn't know what you know, Majid Mal, the, you know, record that song is on. That's fine. I have so much stuff stuffed in my head that I can't remember or I can't keep track of, because, you know, we were never stuck on one style of music or one period of music or whatever. Anyway, that doesn't matter. That's not what we're here for. It doesn't matter to us. But you know, there's always going to be somebody faster. There's always going to be somebody that's got more chops. There's always going to be somebody that knows more chord substitutions.
Absolutely.
Great.
But does it serve the song? Does it serve the song?
You know, I think in some cases, you know, for short periods of time, that can be the case. I mean, who's that player? Eldar?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, he was, you know, hot for a minute there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's got just enormous chops, enormous facility, and enormous intellect.
Yeah.
And I think that at some point, it's fatiguing to the audience. And, you know, I mean, for me to watch it, it's like, oh, wow, yeah, this is crazy. But I think for somebody walking down the street, that's hard to, it's hard to digest.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting though, George, that you say that, because that opens up another door too. You know, I had like 12 doors I wanted to open with you guys, but since door number 15 is here, the marketing concept of who Eldar's music is for, or who Ahmad Jamal's music is for, or who the Hazelrigg's music is for, I mean, that's where you're going to get the most bite, you know, into it. I would say that Eldar, of course, the everyday person should know who this cat is. It's not for them. You know what I mean?
yeah, it's not. Right. It's not for them, and that's fine. And I'm okay with that. I hope he's okay with that, because that's
has to be. If he's not, then he needs to do something else.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not like he's not capable of doing something else. He's capable. That cat's capable of doing whatever he wants.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, okay. But there's also a lot of talk in the jazz industry, like Robert Glasper was on this kick for a lot of, you know, years. Well, how come this isn't hip anymore? How come, you know, everybody's not coming out anymore? Why isn't it as relevant as pop music anymore? And these are all great questions.
Sure.
You know, and you know, I think he's got good points that he makes in these arguments. But
well, so does Herbie. I mean, Herbie says, you know, the same thing as far as the state of jazz music.
I read that whole Herbie meme has gone around, and I think he makes a couple good points in there, but I don't agree with everything that he's saying in there. I don't actually think it's not all about what Herbie's saying. I don't think. I think that you know, there's this sort of black and white approach to, okay, well, you know, if this is too complicated, then we have to make things simple so that, you know, more simple people can understand it. That's garbage.
I disagree with that too. I mean, I disagree.
You know, music was about one thing.
Yeah.
And I had a brilliant teacher at MSM that taught me this, and this has stuck with me since the moment it came out of his mouth. It's one thing. It's tension and resolution.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
That's it. This is what people's lives are. You know,
that's great.
There is tension and resolution. When, you know, rock stars or movie stars don't have enough tension in their lives, they go out and create it. You know, they do. I mean, just ask Justin Timberlake, right? I mean, got himself in a little bit of trouble here. Now he's got tension in his life again.
Yeah, and people are attracted to tension.
Well, it's boring without it. You don't have a sense of purpose if everything is great, right? And music reflects that. It has to reflect that, you know. And okay, so you can't have all one or the other. On one end, you've got, you know, what new age, you know, easy listening thing, you know, stuff where it reminds me of this Gary Larson cartoon that's entitled Charlie Parker's Hell, and you see Satan there with a stack of records, and they've got rainbows and whales on them, right? And on the other end of the spectrum, you have, like, you know, experimental, you know, jazz, you know, like really out, whatever. And so you've got all resolution, boring, you know, and all tension. And what am I going to do with this? Like, there's nothing to do with that. Like, I need another drink or whatever. Like, I can't deal with that. And
that balance.
So, I mean, for me, of course, I need my own tension. I can't leave things well enough alone. And I was thrust out into the smooth jazz industry somewhat against my will. And we would go out and play these gigs with Slim, and I would play solos that didn't sound like other guys' solos, because what I would do is I would try to lead these lines out as far out as I could get and then bring it back. And I found that I could get an audience to be okay with me going all the way out here, because they started to expect, like, okay, well, he's going to land on his feet before I lose interest. And, you know, we try to do that with our records. I think that, we just actually finished recording our latest. And does it go too far at times? I don't know. But the whole time I'm feeling like this thing is about to fall apart. I mean, I feel like the whole thing is hanging by a thread the entire time, and it never breaks. But it feels like it's going to. And I don't know. That's what excites me in music. I don't want to go see somebody type out, you know, the you know, second Rachmaninoff piano concerto without making a mistake. That's boring to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I want to see an accident almost happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then not. Or maybe a little bit and a recovery. Mm-hmm. That's exciting to me.
Absolutely.
You know, in modern methodology of producing records, we've got Pro Tools, and there's, you know, every which way to make things perfect. And hey, this take wasn't good on this, and I'm going to edit this note here or tune this or whatever it is, and it's created a.
I think from a producer standpoint, you know, the perception, and I mean this not necessarily sonically, but as far as the arrangement of the song, you're talking about, you know, being on the edge, but you're the arbiter of that, if this thing falls apart or not. But I think the rescue worker, or the perspective of the ambulance driver pulling up at that moment, has merit. That's you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hopefully that made sense, but I think their perspective has merit as well. Like, okay, here's the scene.
Yeah.
How do we make it better?
Right.
Some arrangements should welcome that perspective. There you go. But, you know, that's right. Me listening to Prince and Ahmad and Slim Man and Paul, just being all
Yeah.
over the place, and Sly Stone, for crying out loud. And
Yeah,
you
right.
go, oh, how do all of these things are welcome. They've shown us that all of these things work. Frank Sinatra, for crying out loud. I mean, with some of Quincy's arrangements, I mean, they have merit. You put it together like that.
Yeah.
But I could talk to you guys for like 3 hours. I still have some questions that I think might be pertinent to the interview. We'll find out, but
It doesn't have anything to do with our tax return, does it?
not at all.
All right,
But
good.
I saw a guy behind you, so obviously I do want to talk about
Who the
Hazelrigg.
guy is? Hey, Matt,
Right, with the wide shot, we understand that there's work that's going on.
you're not in the
But
shot. Come here.
yeah, absolutely. Come on in.
So this is Matthew Glosson. He's our shop assistant. Is he your shop assistant?
He has to
know.
lean down a little bit. We're just getting his shoulders. We're not getting his head at all.
He's his own man. He's actually a contractor.
Is that right?
Yeah, and we farm out work to him, and he comes in here and he gets a lot of parts put together, and sometimes he takes them home and puts them all together in his shop at home, and he brings them back, and we have these beautifully built out PC boards ready to install in our units, which allows us to have enough time to keep making music. So, and it's hard to find guys like this because this is highly skilled work, and you have to have an understanding of it. And he has a much greater understanding of the stuff than I do.
Well, I
And he likes-
apologize for those of you who are listening to the podcast. You can't see what's going on in Hazelrigg Industries, but there's all kinds of equipment and whatnot, and we'll get into that in a few. I didn't mean to cut you off, Geoff. You were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, Matthew likes the work. He's actually itching to get back to work right now.
Well, thank you for gracing us with your presence. But before we start talking about, because you guys are entering into the plugin world now, you have these extremely high quality solutions for modern recordings. You got the deal going with Sweetwater. I want to step on those things, but just to finish up the portion of the Hazelrigg Brothers as creative musicians, this new project that you had introduced, is this the one where you being the two of you being pioneers of going in Adobe Atmos? Is this the project that we're talking about?
No, although that one is I'll get back to that. Now this is our this is just our next trio record. Now Synchronicity is available in Atmos. It is in Atmos now, and it was done in Atmos by Sean Dealey at Sweetwater, and it was mixed at Sweetwater Studios. And he did a great job on it, and it was a very interesting project, and eye-opening, because we thought, okay, Atmos, you've got all the speaker real estate, you need a lot of microphones and a lot of information to kind of fill up the space. Our recordings are 4 channels. It's 2 stereo mics. There's 4 tracks. That's it. That's the whole thing. Sean took those 4 tracks and put them in Atmos, and it's like, wow, you are inside of the room. It sounds like you are sitting on the floor in between the instruments, and it's just happening around you. It's 4 channels. That's it. It's pretty phenomenal. The Atmos project that we have been working on a bit at Sweetwater with this very talented artist was put on hold for a while because Mike Miller, the Atmos King, right, who was our good friend and partner and
client and
everything. Tragically passed away.
Oh my!
A couple months ago. I mean, he's 30 years old. I mean, he had worked himself to the top of the industry. I mean, he really had amazing vision and amazing talent. And so we had mostly completed this record with him, and he didn't make it. It was a really hard hit for all of us. So his fiance, who took care of him minute by minute for, and before that ran his business, really, she's an amazing person, said, okay, look, we need to finish all of this work and realize Mike's vision on all this stuff, and we're doing that right now, and so we're hoping in the next few months we'll finally be able to get that project out. It's not like anything anybody's ever heard. So and Mike was the one who did the Atmos mixes for Harry's House, the Harry Styles record, which is considered by most people in the industry to be the benchmark for pop Atmos mixes.
Understood.
So you can imagine a ground up project with this in mind. It's hair raising. I mean, you'll hear it when it's done. Any naysayers about the Atmos format? Oh, we don't need that for music. All right. I hope you got a tape off.
Well, I've heard the pros and cons, even from engineers that I respect that are poo-pooing Atmos. I mean, if I did not hear it for myself and sat in the room while it was happening, I have a good friend in Danny Jones out in Houston, who was contracted by, I believe it was Sony, who acquired the Al Green discography to put his greatest hits in Dolby Atmos. And so I'm sitting there listening, and I'm going, God, I could hear the squeak of the kick pedal.
It's crazy. Yeah, Sean had some mixes of Steve Miller, right?
Oh boy.
Recording. Steve Miller had been into the studio there and was mixing, doing Atmos mixes for a lot of that legacy stuff.
Wow.
And wow, what a fresh perspective on this music. I mean,
sure.
It's really cool.
Absolutely.
I mean,
it's beyond. There was an Earth, Wind, and Fire record that they were playing for me. I think they were just showing me demos, but you would think that you're imagining that you can hear the spit from the lip of the trombonist. But I thought, I looked over my shoulder like, oh my God, I could hear it. I'm actually on stage with these guys.
Yeah.
Craziness.
I have no technical explanations for why that works that way. I mean, we record all our stuff in DSD. I mean, we could talk about, but so our capture is absolutely down to the molecule.
Yeah.
What's happening in the room. And our mixes are carefully put together to maintain that stuff. When we heard Synchronicity back in the room at Sweetwater, we went out there to prove the final John had done. Like, what are we hearing? Right. There's notes that I didn't remember playing. There's the level of detail, little idiosyncrasies about like, oh, that tom has an extra little bloom to it. Tiny little details that you're hearing. It's like, where's this even coming from?
Right.
I don't know how it works. Honestly, I don't care how it works. That's not my job. I'm too old to go diving into a new technology like that on that level. There are other people who could do this. When we finished this project with Mike had already figured out 98% of what needs to be done, and we've got engineers that we're working with him that can, button it up in a way that he would have approved. I don't need to know about this stuff. All I know is when I'm sitting in the room, it isn't like anything that I've ever imagined.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's beyond. You'd have to be there. And I know that there are more projects that are coming out, so people can be exposed to them. I don't know about the earbuds now because Apple has earbuds that kind of simulate the experience. I have not tried those out.
We have headphones. When we started to get into this this whole project with Mike says, "I'm sending you a present," and he drop shipped us a pair of those. Are
they buds or are they?
Whatever they are, yeah.
Okay.
Which are actually very, very well designed. They're really nice headphones.
Wow.
Anyway, I would say you get to retain 60 to 70% of the experience of being in an Atmos room.
Well, that's pretty good.
I don't know how they do that either. And here again, I don't care. I don't need to know. But somehow it's doing it. It's doing it. And it's look, I think that it's getting a lot of bad press because it's like the CD. You remember when CDs came out?
Yeah. I remember the hazmat suits,
What's that?
Remember that? Remember the hazmat suits that they showed that the people?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it was a mad rush by all the record companies to dredge up all their legacy material and sell you their entire catalog yet again in a new format. It's this, it's that, it's the other thing. Well, nobody understood anything about it back then. Nobody knew how to manipulate it. And they sent the interns into the studio, at 3 a.m. Hey, we need to do transfers, or we have to do that. Nobody knew what they were doing.
Right.
All this stuff. Yeah, it was horrible. CDs sounded terrible for the first 5 years they were in existence. And arguably, to some degree, they still do. But, but there was no innate understanding of the technology, how it needed to be manipulated, how it needed to be cared for. And so, a lot of these same engineers, they weren't the same guys because, of course, some of the guys are the same. But, they said, we don't need this, or it doesn't sound as good as analog. And, they were right back then. So anyway, it's the same mad rush now. And this is what Mike Miller was doing a lot of, was doing these massive catalogs, he did the entire Chris Brown catalog.
Wow.
There were a number of artists that actually did all the Atmos mixes for, but he did it in his $500,000 room.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys were doing Atmos mixes on headphones.
Oh boy.
And saying, okay, this is good enough, and the record company's like, okay, this is good enough, and they're putting them out on iTunes, and people are like, this doesn't sound that good. Right, it doesn't sound that good. But that's not the format's fault.
Right. That is absolutely.
That's a matter of circumstance in the business right now. That has nothing to do with what the potential of this format is. And music advances when you have technological advances.
True.
It's all technology based. In my case, when you went from the harpsichord and, when that ended in the 1740s into forte pianos, you went from Bach to Mozart. And then when that developed more, you went from Mozart to Beethoven. And, that's a huge leap.
It is.
Musically. It's a huge shift in aesthetics of things.
Yes.
I'm not saying that they're better or worse. I don't think that Beethoven, concertos are greater than, Bach concertos are. I don't believe that. Yeah. But they're both great in their own right, and they both reflect the time. I think that we've been stuck in a certain technological era for about 2 decades now. You know, it's when Pro Tools became the way that everybody did everything. And, you know, these are the methodologies that are used to make, you know, this type of genre or that type of genre or whatever. And whereas there has been advances made in the quality of the software or whatever, certainly a plugin now sounds vastly better than it did 20 years ago.
Sure.
It's still sort of the same thing. Atmos is a technological advance. It is. It is something different with which you can do something different.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, our project with this artist that you know had been developing with Mike Miller was to explore what those possibilities would be. You know, we were theorizing, okay, most of the engineering focus in the last, I don't know, mixed down industrial complex. How long has this been going on?
Well, Pro Tools 20, well, beyond that even, but yeah.
I guess it's really sort of
Nice.
CLA kind of made this culture of the celebrity engineer and whatever. So, you know, there's been so much emphasis put on how a record is mixed, you know, by whom a record is mixed.
Certainly.
That people have lost interest in, well, how are you going to hang this microphone? What's the microphone? What's the microphone preamp? And are you really going to compress that? And if you are, then whatever, you know, what's this room look like? Who's the player?
Right.
You know, does he know how to tune that drum kit? You know, what a difference it makes to be able to tune a drum kit the right way. I mean, you know, it's night and day.
Exactly.
Atmos has the potential to put the emphasis back on that. Because now there's no place to hide. If you didn't do a good performance, if the player wasn't on point, if they didn't
found out.
Right? There's a whole speaker in the room dedicated to outing you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It will be found out.
It will.
Now, this is a good segue into, again, what we see behind you, because for years you have been developing your own equipment. You have the distribution deal with Sweetwater, but now you're stepping into the plug-in world. And how's that transition happening for you?
Well, it's funny, you know, we don't use that stuff ourselves, typically. Our own, you know, what people call workflow nowadays is drastically different than most. We track to Pyramix, not to Pro Tools. We track in DSD, not, you know, 96K or 44.1K or whatever. We track at 11.2 megahertz DSD. This is a completely different system of doing digital, and compared to working with PCM, it has a lot of operating limitations. I mean, so we're not really in that world. We don't own a lot of plugins. We don't use a lot of plugins.
No.
So you know what my question is going to be then, because I know how meticulous you are with respect to what you demand from your hardware.
Right.
I know you've walked into a room and had to, especially with the VLC plugin, you've had to A and B it to go, okay, do I dig it or what's happening? What has been your response for what happened in the transformation from hardware to software? Because your name is on it.
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, we dig it. We think, you know, they did a great job with the plugin. But like George said, we don't, I mean, personally, we don't live in that
DAW world
system, that most people live in. And it's hard, it's hard for people to understand it. I think the equivalent is us. Our digital system is much more akin to a tape machine than it is to Pro Tools. I mean, it's a non-linear tape machine, but it's a tape machine. Mm-hmm. And so we just don't live in that world. That being said, they did a great job with the plugin. It really captures what the hardware does.
Mm-hmm. But
it's just,
so tell me this world. if you wouldn't mind, because most of the people who are listening to this podcast or watching us now, 90% are not on DSD, and they do have Cubase, they have Logic.
Yeah, it's more than
99.9%.
Yeah,
exactly right. So
from that standpoint, it's phenomenal. So they take a different approach. So they component model. Okay. So instead of taking, what do they call impulses off of audio and record that and analyze what the thing is doing to the sound, they go in and electrical engineer it. Okay. It hits this, 100 UF, whatever. What does that component do electrically? And they modeled that. Okay, then it goes to here. That hits this next thing. What does that do? What is it? And so it's a totally different approach to it. And when we first heard it, we were totally blown away. Wow, the behavior of this is the same as the behavior of the hardware piece. So to be fair,
my question to be, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but my question then, again, speaking to the 99.9, what does VLC stand for? Why do I need it? Why would I buy it? How does it help my mixing? Because I'm thinking totally in the box.
All right. Well, so this goes back to 2014, when I was building preamps for Doug Fern. A lot of our friends had heard the preamp that we're recording with and said, we love it, but it won't fit in our suitcase. So we designed a package which called the VLC, which it's a preamplifier that you're going to record with, your microphone or bass or anything like that. So it's a preamplifier for a mic. It has a DI input. It has an equalizer on it. We call it a passive equalizer, which works in a very natural kind of way. Yeah. And that's what the VLC is. It's a vacuum tube preamp with an LC, which is inductor capacitor equalizer. That's what VLC stands for. That's where we started this whole journey of things. So then in about 2015 we got it developed and started putting them into production right around then, right? 2015.
Mm-hmm. I see. So I appreciate that explanation. And again, George, didn't mean to cut you off, but I know what comments are going to be happening under the podcast. Well, what does this mean? I'm thinking this is a great thing. When I got the email from the company, the first thing I did was call you. Okay, I want to put my money down, but how is this going to help? Why? And I want to answer that question for those who would be, because I love you guys, and I think that what you're doing with this high quality, I mean, your stuff is second to none. It's right up in there. And so how does that help me now that I don't buy that, but I will buy this plugin? So,
okay. So just to circle back around and wrap everything into one neat package. We didn't set out to build hardware. We set out to make great recordings, like songs we like. And I mean, we really kind of developed the VLC to record songs we like, which was sort of the proving grounds for it. Now, the plugin lets you sort of get your hands on that sound and get your hands on the idea of how the hardware can help you achieve a certain sonic goal. So, I mean, the plugin does it, helps you do it too. You're not recording your microphone with it when it's only in software, but it will help you manipulate things you've already recorded and get them that much closer to what you would have had you started with the right thing in the first place.
And it works. It works.
So where am I putting this? Am I putting this VLC on my mix bus? Am I putting
everywhere
it across my tracks? It's just
everywhere.
Everything.
Okay.
You can put it on your master, mix bus. You can put it on vocal tracks. You can put it on a bass. It doesn't matter. Drum bus.
It's just going to bring that.
Well, see. So what the hardware does is it all circuits distort, and a lot of circuits that are lesser in design and expense distort into odd order harmonics. And so if you have a C, and you hit a third order harmonic distortion, it creates a G on top, an octave up. And then, if you get up into further harmonics that are odd, they create other notes. And these, you can imagine, that makes a harmonic mess of things.
Sure.
These circuits distort into octaves, basically. It's even order harmonics. And so that actually embellishes and supports fundamental frequencies. And so it kind of resorts things in a way that makes them more musical. And so you really literally can take, say, a vocal track that doesn't really vibe very well, throw that plugin across it, kind of slam it a little bit, and it will reorder all these nasty harmonics into things that are more musical and palatable.
Beautiful.
It's magic, actually.
Beautiful.
It's also magic.
Beautiful.
But it's that too. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Man, well, again, as I said before, it's nothing for us to take this into a 3 or 4 hour conversation. But then that's not how you pay your mortgage, because you've got work to do. We can see it behind you.
Matthew's doing all the work today.
Okay. Gotcha. But I'm so grateful, first of all, to know you personally. Trish Hennessy, we have to give her a shout out, because she was the one that introduced us in the first place. And
right.
Grateful to know you, grateful to have gone through songs we like. Spot check Synchronicity. I have to get more into it. But the stuff that you allowed me to hear was just magic. I think you reinterpreted. I think Sting is going to love you. Has he reached out to you at all?
No.
Real question.
It's funny. I mean, we're at a point in the music industry that we can contact almost anybody pretty easily, but not Sting. And we've got people in common with Sting.
Gotcha.
And Sting is even, probably unbeknownst to him, benefited to some degree from our products. He had a Grammy for Best Male Vocal, maybe 20 some odd years ago, and it was cut through a Fern VT1 mic preamp.
Wow.
But somehow, though we've had numerous attempts to kind of get to people in a circle, I don't know. Or maybe he's heard it and he didn't like it. I don't know. I mean, it'd be great to have a conversation with him about it at some point, and maybe we will.
Well, I'll have my people call his people, and he'll get back to you. Okay. I didn't know you were having a problem. I'll make the call. Okay.
Okay. Perfect. That's good.
Well, any final words, Geoff, George? Anything that you thought? Yes, Jerry's definitely going to ask this question, and I didn't ask it. I mean, of course, we've covered a lot of ground in this session here.
Time and pressure, Jerry. We're just, there's a lot of things to accomplish, and it just takes a while.
Yeah, I agree with that. And
it's like Shawshank Redemption. It's going through a 4-foot concrete wall with a tiny little rock hammer.
They're welcome to the music industry. You know, this
Yeah,
is
that's
what it
it.
is, right?
We're still here,
This is,
though, right? I mean,
we're still
isn't
here, and I mean, but there's nothing. What else are we going to do?
I,
Just comes
I
down
mean,
to
I'm otherwise utterly unemployable.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. I agree with that.
so yeah.
I have one last question though for you, and this is specifically to George, is that maybe there's a secret as to what I can do to get Geoff to actually come on Artist Impact. I mean, I'm not asking this of Geoff. I'm asking this of George.
Oh, there's a simple answer to that. Now the problem is you guys tape it on Monday nights, and he's busy Monday nights. Although your schedule's cleared up.
Monday night is a busy night in my house.
Gotcha.
I can make time for you, Jerry. I absolutely can. It's summertime, so it is easier. My wife's a teacher during the school year, and my daughter's headed to college in the fall, so that helps things.
Well, we scheduled it on Monday night because, there were from Thursday to Sunday, most musicians are working. And so, you know what I mean? It's like the Monday night seems to be, unless there's an open jam session somewhere where they could record. So I'm the flexible one, but, as we go around the United States and abroad, it's like, no, I can't film it on Friday, Saturday. You're nuts. You know what I mean?
I will make myself available. You let me know when.
I will do that because we won't tape another episode of Artist Impact unless Geoff Hazelrigg is on it. I'll just tell them all, no, forget it.
I was upset that you didn't put me on the one with Greg Boyer.
No, we talked about that.
Yeah, you're not going to either, are you?
Ever. No, ever. No, I'm going to actually just schedule a podcast where it'll be the three of us and you and George. Greg can just go at it because Greg, excellent dude, man. I love that.
Oh,
brother, I think that'll be a great conversation. So
definitely
we'll make it happen. But in any event, I love both of you all. I'm waiting to see when our next opportunity to break bread together at the Cracker Barrel or anywhere you choose.
Well, see, we're going to have to figure that out because that drive from here to Fort Wayne has become so long and treacherous that we basically only really want to take the plane at this point.
I see.
And so what you have to do is figure out what airport we can meet you at halfway, because we can do that, and we can refuel.
Yeah.
Wherever it needs to be a smaller general aviation airport.
Well, actually, I need to come down to Fort Wayne. There's a young lady I'm working with, Lisa McDavid, and we're writing songs together. And she, there's a band like Sweetwater has a house band. And she's one of the vocalists. So she's telling me I got to come down there. So I may just try to coordinate my schedule that when you're there.
We'll pick you up on the way.
No problem.
If you're brave enough, we'll just pick you up in Ohio and fly out there with us.
That's fine.
We're probably out there, next month. Actually, I think, aren't we?
Something like that.
August or September, we'll go out. We'll hook it up.
Excellent. We'll do that. Very, very cool. Well, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, this is George and Geoff Hazelrigg, the Hazelrigg Brothers, as far as their trio is concerned, and Hazelrigg Industries. But you can just go to hazelrigbrothers.com and Google or Firefox will send you where you need to go. If you love high-end, extremely high-quality solutions for modern recording, you want to check out their equipment. And if you love high-quality music, meticulously done, they have taken over where Fagan and Becker have left off as far as meticulousness, and they've done it with their trio. They're my friends and my brothers. I love them so much. These are the Hazelrigg Brothers. Many blessings to the two of you.
Love you too, Jared. Thanks for having us on again, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to do it of this episode of the Entre Musician Podcast. Again, go to hazelrigbrothers.com. Learn more about George and Geoff. you will appreciate their contribution to music. My name is Jerry B. I am the Entree Musician. Tell everybody you know and 12 people you don't know that you get down with the Entree Musician. Tell them to come on into the community. The water is fine. We will see you next time. God bless.